Hi there. Welcome to Coding Across the Curriculum, where I'm going to show you how to use coding in other areas of the curriculum. Today, we're going to be using Scratch to make an interactive display or map, which can share a variety of different things. You could use this to explain about characters or the plot of a book, to expand on a timeline of events, to give information about places on a map, to explain the different steps of a scientific process or life cycle. Today, I'll be making an actual map to show you information about countries that I've lived in. We'll be using 3 special sets of blocks to do this activity. The show, hide, and go to front blocks, the if touching and if not touching group of blocks, and the message blocks. Before we begin though, let's take some time to think about who will use the programs we make and how will they use them. How much information do we want to give them and how will it work? Will our user have to press a button or just hover over it? What will the background diagram be? I put my ideas roughly on this piece of paper. I'm going to start really simple. I just want a simple map that will tell about the 2 main countries I've lived in, Canada and New Zealand. I'll have some information boxes pop up when the mouse hovers over a target on the map and disappear when it isn't hovering over the target. I'm going to include some basic information about both countries, the flag, the capital city, the population, and some other things. I've made my cards on Google Drawings. Here's the one I've made for Canada. I've just used a text box up here, another one down here, and I've searched on Google to find a free-to-use image. Now that we know what we want to do, it's time to talk about the tools we're going to use to code this. If you want to skip to a different part of the video, because maybe some of it's too easy, click on the timestamps below in the description. The main point of making an interactive display is that certain elements appear when we want them to, and then hide when we don't want to see them anymore. To make sure that we see everything when we want to, we use 3 different blocks. The hide block, which will make a sprite hide from us. The show block, which tells it to appear. And the go to front block, which makes sure that we don't have anything on top of what we want to show. The show, hide, and go to front blocks are found in the purple looks blocks. Here, here, and all the way down here. For our program, we want our information to appear or disappear depending on whether or not the mouse is touching a sprite or not touching a sprite. We will need 4 different blocks put together to make this work. An if block, a touching block, a not block, and a forever block. The if block and the forever block are in the yellow control blocks. Here and here. The if block checks if something is true in this little space and runs whatever's inside if it is true. If it's not true, we skip over this bit. In the case of our program, we want to put this if block inside a forever block so it's constantly checking to see whether or not this is true. The touching block is in the blue sensing blocks, and it will return a true if the sprite is touching the mouse pointer, or in reality, if the mouse pointer is touching the sprite. You can also have it go if it is touching the edge, or if you've got other sprites, they'll show up there as well. The last bit that we need for this is the not block, and that's in the green operator blocks here. And it does the reverse of this. So instead of returning true, if the mouse is touching the sprite, it will return true if it is not touching the sprite. So then it will run there. Whatever's in here will be run if it is not touching, and it will be skipped if it is touching. The message blocks allow the program to run certain parts of the code when a message is sent. For example, if I press the on button on my computer, the computer turns on. It needs me to send the message or the code won't run. We'll need both the broadcast message block and the when I receive message block to make them work. Both of the message blocks can be found in the brown events blocks. Here for broadcast message and here for when I receive message. I'll need to look up some images to use for my map background. So I'm going to search for map of world and go to images. Remember that when you're using images, you need to click on Tools, Usage Rights, and Labeled for Use with Modification. I like this globe, and it's got a fairly big size, so I'm going to save image as. I also need to download my information card as a JPEG so that I can use the image as a sprite in Scratch. I do that by going to File, Download as, JPEG. You might want to pause the video now and make your own information cards so that you can use them in your program, if you haven't already done so. Now we're ready to start making our program in Scratch. I've uploaded my 2 information cards and my globe by using the Upload Sprite from File button. A couple things that I need to do first is that I need to make sure my globe is bigger. So I'm going to expand that until it's about the size that I want. And I'm going to move it in the middle. However, it is on top of things. So I'm going to use the Looks button and I'm going to drag this out and keep on clicking it until it is back all the way at the back. And I'll put that out. The other sprites that I need to make are going to be my targets. So I'm going to go on Paint New Sprite, and I'm going to use just a circle, and I'm going to make them red. So I'll use the Fill button, and I'll keep them like that. I need to make sure that it's in the middle, so I click Middle, and I want to make it just a little bit smaller. So there we go. To make a second sprite, I'm going to click on Sprite 1 and duplicate. And I also click on Info to change it from Target 1 and Target 2. I'm going to move my info cards out of the way so I can place the targets where they want to be, and I'll place them where the 2 capital cities of the countries are. And I'm going to place the info cards where I want them to show up when they are pressed. I'll start by programming the target dots. The first block I'm going to use is, as usual, is an event block. So in this case, when the green flag clicked. I want the block to stay where it is so that whenever the program starts, it needs to go to this position. Generally, it won't move, but just to be on the safe side, I want to make sure that it is going to start in that position every time. The next thing I need to do is open up a forever loop. I want this program to be continually checking the things that are inside so that they work whenever the conditions are met, whether or not it's been 1 time or 2 times or 10 minutes later. Inside that forever loop, I'm going to put an if-then block. And inside the if-then block, I'm going to put a the touching mouse pointer. And if the sprite and the mouse pointer are touching, I want a message to be broadcast. So I'm going to call that message, new message, show Canada. The flip side of that is that I also want the program to be checking that if it is not touching the mouse pointer. So I'm going to make another if block, a not block, and touching the mouse pointer. And this time I'm going to put yet another second message in and call that message hide Canada. Now this is all great, but we actually have to do something when these messages are broadcast. So I'm going to go over to the Canada information card, and when the green flag is clicked, I'm going to also have the card go to a certain spot, and I also want it to hide initially because we don't want it to be seen at the beginning. We only want it to be seen when the target is being hovered on. So I'll go back to my events block, and I'm going to pick 2 of them out when I receive hide Canada and when I receive show Canada. And it's really just a simple matter of putting a show block for show Canada and a hide block for hide Canada. Now it's your turn. See if you can make a program that shows an information card when you hover over a target. It's really important when we are coding that we learn how to check and debug our programs as often as we can. We want to catch our mistakes early and fix them before we have too many lines of code to sift through. I'm going to run my code to see if everything lines up.
I want to make sure that my program works exactly how I figured it out in my head. In this program, there are a few things that could go wrong, so let's try it. I'm going to press the green arrow there. When I hover over the Canada button, the Canada target, nothing happens. Let's see what happens if I hover over the New Zealand target. And sure enough, I've mixed up my targets. Also, you can see that when I do hover over the target, it's above, it's the target is still above the info card, which is not what we want. We want the target below the info card. So there's a few things that I'm going to need to do to change. First of all, I'm going to need to I'm going to stop the program, then copy the code from target 1 into target 2, and delete the code in target 1. Now, our go-to block, however, is wrong because if I click on the flag, it's going to go to this spot. And we don't want it to go to that spot. We want it to go to this over here. So I'm going to remove that and replace it with the go-to coordinates that are for that space. So that should work out now. The next thing I need to make sure is that when I receive show Canada, not only does it show, but it goes to the front to start. So let's try that again. And that is indeed what I want to see.
In future videos, we'll have a look at debugging, which is where we find and fix our mistakes. Stop the video now and try your program. Does it do what you want it to do? This program only has one information card, which, while useful, is not as helpful as it could be. I'm going to add a second card.
To make this second information card work, it's actually quite a simple process. You can just drag the code from the target that I just made to the other target and make a few small changes. So now on the target one, which is the one down here, I need to change the go-to block to the coordinates for that, and I need to change the messages. So instead of show Canada, I'm going to make a new message that says show NZ, and I'm going to make a new message here that says hide NZ. I'll just make sure, right. And then I'm going to go to the New Zealand info card and do the same thing. So when the sprite's clicked, go to this spot. When I receive hide NZ, and when I receive show NZ, and I'm going to do my show, hide, and go to front. I also remember I need to hide the information card at the beginning. Now, you could use any number of information cards, but you probably want to limit it to probably 5 to 10 somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of clutter on your screen with the targets. But let's just double check to see how this works. So there we go. I've got my Canadian information, and I've got my New Zealand information.
While I'm finishing off my program, why don't you try adding more to yours? Don't forget to test it and debug it if necessary before you return to me. You can make your interactive display more interesting by adding sounds to it or by adding a second page. Both of these things require some crafty thinking, but luckily for you, I've done some of that and you can watch and learn from what I've done to add more information to your display.
To add a sound to your information card, go to that sprite and click on the Sounds tab up here. You can record your own sound for use in a coding block. I'm just going to add a short clip explaining that I was born and grew up in Canada, and a short clip that explains that I currently live in New Zealand. I'll record the sounds on each of the sprites I want them to be on. So, starting with the Canada sprite, I'm going to record and press this button here. I was born and grew up in Canada. I was born and grew up in Canada. And I'm going to delete this other pop sound and go to the New Zealand card, delete the pop sound, record a new sound, and currently I live in New Zealand where I am a school teacher. Currently I live in New Zealand where I am a school teacher. Because of the way we coded the earlier part of the program, we need to do some clever coding now to put the sounds in so that they play and only play once. For every sound we want to play then, we'll need a variable. In this case, we'll call them Canada sound and NZ sound. And at the beginning of the program, we need to set both of these, so set NZ sound to 0 and set the Canada sound to 0. The next thing we'll do is have the Canada sound variable go up by 1 every time that we receive the show Canada variable. We'll then use, after that, an if-then block to check to see if the variable Canada sound equals 1. We do this because if we're hovering over the block, the computer goes pretty quick, and what will happen is the sound will just keep on starting over and over and over and over and over again. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to limit it to only going the first time that that variable gets sent, because otherwise it'll be multiple times in the first section, or this first second, sorry, and you'll hear a sound. So once we have the, in that one case, we're going to do two things. The first thing is to stop all sounds because maybe there'll be another sound playing and we don't want them to overlap. And we're going to play the sound recording 1, which is the voice of me telling that I was born and grew up in Canada. The last thing we'll also need to do is to go back to the data blocks and set the Canada sound to 0 when they receive hide Canada, which is in the case when the mouse comes off of the target, so that a new sound can start again if we want it to. Having 2 pages of information that can go back and forth can be a little bit tricky, but we can use some more broadcast messages to show and hide certain parts and to stop information cards from appearing when we're on the wrong page. The first thing we need to do is have targets for each page. So I've made some for a target for page 1 and a target for page 2. I've also brought in another sprite to use as my second background, so it's a map of Canada. So the first thing I'm going to do is code the page 2 target because that's the one that's going to be visible when I'm on page 1, so that I know that I can go there. So the first thing I need to do is a green flag block and a go to block and a show block because I definitely need to see that when the green flag is on. I'm going to start with a forever loop because we want this constantly kind of checking whether or not it happens, and then an if then block. This time we're actually going to use an and operator because we want it to sense 2 things. The first is that the mouse pointer is touching, but also that the mouse is down. So basically when we click on it. So the next bit we're going to do is if that's the case, we're going to broadcast a new message, which we are going to call new message page 2. We'll also need this target to, when it receives page 2, to hide. And when it receives the message for page 1, which we haven't made yet, so I'll just make it now. Page 1, when we receive that message, we need this sprite or this target to show. And let's go to let's make a copy of this and put it into page 1 and change what we need to do. So we don't want it to be in the same spot. So we'll get rid of that and put a new go to. We wanted this one to actually hide at the start, and we're going to have it broadcast page 1 instead. And then the same things here when I receive messages, and for page 1 we want it to hide, because when we're on page 1 we don't want it to be there, and when they receive page 2 we want this one to show. Then we go to our display picture, our backgrounds here, so the display pictures, and we're going to put in the same set of blocks. So when I receive page 2, since this is page 2, I'm going to want that to show. And when I receive page 2 show, and receive page 1 hide, the opposite for the first globe. So when I receive page 1, and when I receive page 2, and so this is our first page because we're on the globe, we're going to hide for page 2 and show for page 1. The last bit we need to code is the tricky bit, and that's with our target blocks. The first thing that we'll need to do is make sure that when the flag is clicked, the sprite, the target shows itself. So after the go-to block, we put a show in there. Then we're going to go to our event blocks, and when I receive a page 2 message, that's when it's going to disappear. First thing it will do is we want it to hide. But then we need to add one of the control blocks, which is called the stop block. And we want to stop all other scripts in Sprite. So that means it's going to stop this bit here. So that when we receive page 2, it's going to hide, and it's going to stop. If we hover over it, it's not going to appear. And we don't want it to hover, that hover to work, because it's on a different page and it's different information. However, then what we will need to do is when we do the, when I receive page 1, we're going to need to do a show block, but we're also going to need to restart this script. So I'm just going to duplicate and put that down there. It's really important we do this, otherwise when it comes back up, while the target will show, you won't get any reaction when you hover over it. So I will leave you to do the rest of the blocks, and I'll do the rest of the blocks while you're working, and then I'll come back and show you the final program before we finish.
Now it's your turn to add something extra to your program. Pause the video and have a try.
I've just spent some time going through my program, making sure that it worked exactly how I wanted to. When I went through, there was a few bugs that I missed, a few show or hide blocks that I didn't have. So it's really important that when you're doing your work that you do the same thing. Go through, check that you've got everything, that it works properly. If it doesn't, have a look at the code and see what you need to fix. And that's a huge part of programming. I'll show you what I've finished so far. So I press the green button, and I've got this one.
I was born and grew up in Canada.
I've got this target.
Currently, I live in New Zealand where I am a school teacher.
And if I switch the pages, I've got a third target. This is my hometown.
That's all for now. I hope you've learned something from this. Please check the description for some links to sample programs. You can also click on the timestamps to review any parts of the video you didn't quite get the first time. If you've used this video to make an interactive display, please post a link in the comments. We'd love to see what you've made, and it would help anyone else using this video. If you liked what you saw, please click subscribe and watch our other videos, which will be coming soon. Bye!